Hello. Welcome to Coming in Hot with Abby Baird. I am Abby Baird, your host, and I am so excited to talk with everyone today. Coming in Hot, just as a reminder, is a live stream that's all focused on the next generation of supply chain, as well as a bunch of different industries, and we're going to be able to talk about some really exciting things today. Today, we're actually going to be talking about career changes and pivots and what that looks like, not just for my generation, but for people who are in the middle of their career or maybe towards the end of their career as well. I think this is a really exciting topic because it highlights and touches so many different people. And I think a lot of people struggle with it. Maybe not just people who are about to leave college, but people who are in the middle of their careers. And so I have someone so amazing who we're going to bring on, and we're going to be able to talk about this really awesome topic. So may I welcome to the stage, Alison Herring. Hello.
Hi, Abby. So good to see you.
So good to see you, and thank you for being here. I would love for you to just introduce yourself to the audience. Alison is such a great resource. So I'm excited for the audience to get to know you. And for those of you in the audience, make sure you type in the chat, say where you're from. And we're so excited for you all to be here. So Alison, take it away.
Thank you, Abby. It's good to see you. I'm Alison Herring, and I was an accounting graduate from the University of Arkansas. And when I graduated, I entered a very traditional career for an accounting major, and I joined one of the big four public accounting firms. That career took me to Richmond, Virginia, which is where I am now. And I worked for that firm for about 16 years. I don't anymore, but I had a career there that was very traditional in the audit practice, which is the type of career you would expect to go into as a student graduating with an accounting degree. But I had a significant career shift or pivot at about the 10-year mark. That represented a huge change for me professionally and personally. I know that that's something that you and I have talked about before in the past, Abby, and that we're excited to talk about today. And currently at Arkansas, I serve on the Accounting Advisory Board with the William Dillard Department of Accounting and volunteer my time there. It's very rewarding to get to meet students like you and be supportive of you and your careers.
That is awesome. Yeah, you do so many things. You're the woman who does it all. But welcome. I'm so excited for all of our audience to be able to really dive into this conversation with us about what career pivots look like. So we have Ghani from Qatar with us. That is so fun that we get to have such a global audience to be able to talk about this. And yes, like the chat says, definitely connect with Alison on LinkedIn. But Alison and I actually got connected through an organization at the University of Arkansas, kind of like a mentorship program. And so we spent a semester just getting to know each other. And she really poured into me because she has a lot of experience and she has had so many career shifts and different experiences. And I've just learned so much from her. Hi, Kevin from Kenya. That is so neat. So that's a little bit about how Alison and I know each other, but let's just dive into it. I'm really excited to talk about career pivots and career changes because I think, like I said earlier, it touches so many different generations, but I think for college students particularly, they feel a lot of pressure of getting straight out of the gates in college and finding a job that's either right in the exact industry they want to be in or the exact job that they want to be in, rather than realizing that you can have multiple different careers and multiple shifts. And so I think when we talk about career pivots and career shifts, how do you find those opportunities in your career? How do you identify those opportunities and how do you pursue them?
So for me, it was about being aware of the things that I was naturally interested in. So my major was accounting, so I was interested in accounting and I was naturally good at it. And so that was something I wanted to pursue. But there were other things that I was interested in too. I had I'll call it an IT knack. So I liked taking classes in IT at the time, which in 1999 was different from what it looks like today. But I made sure that I got exposed to things that I felt like I was gravitating towards in addition to what my major was. And I like the way you put that, Abby, because when you're graduating from college and you have your major, whatever that is, if it's supply chain, if it's accounting, or if it's something else, there is going to be kind of what I would call a traditional path that you hear about when you're in college and that the recruiters are going to tell you about. And that's where most people enter their profession, is through this entry-level position. But it's hard to fathom how different your career is ultimately going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and 15 years from now, because it's hard for you to imagine all the changes and the pivots and the shifts and the innovations that are going to take place over that time period. So when I look back on where I thought my career was going to go, it was a very limited version of what it actually was. And I'm thankful for that, because it means that I stayed open-minded. So I think that's a big point. That's one of the answers to your questions, is if you stay open-minded and open to new opportunities and different paths that stray from that traditional path that you have come to embrace, then you have an opportunity to take a different path and have a very different career from what you envision. So it's important not to put too much pressure on yourself when picking the perfect major or thinking about your entry point into the business world, because all of that is going to shift and change. So you're probably viewing that as, here's what my entry point is, but the different paths and opportunities that are going to open up for you. Like, I couldn't have envisioned that I would originally start out with a career where I was in audit. So meaning auditing public companies, writing memos about mergers and acquisitions and stock-based compensation, to going into a role where I was on a leadership team over a software deployment, which is a very different role from a traditional accounting role. And that was a very big shift for me, both personally and professionally. But that's an example of something that I couldn't have seen coming. Mm-hmm. And you asked, how did I stay open to that, or how did I maybe position myself to get into a role like that? Because when you're in a traditional role, I think what I was doing was I was paying attention to what was coming down the pipeline at the firm. So I was paying attention to what was on the horizon. So when I was attending firm-related events and there were leaders that were speaking, I was listening to what was going to be on the horizon, especially software-related, because I mentioned, while I had an accounting background, I was interested in software. And had a knack for it, and was speaking up about that in my home office, such that an opportunity opened up 5 years before the software deployment, when it was still being developed. So that's a pretty long arc to go to New York and New Jersey to participate in a short-term project. And I did that. They cleared my audit schedule. I went to New York, New Jersey for that time period. I think I was up there for 2 or 3 months. I've forgotten the exact time period. But I went out of my way to make friends, to be friendly, to get to know the people that were working on this. And that can be as simple as saying, do you want to go get to lunch? Would you like to go get lunch with me? I'd love to hear more about your career. I'd love to know more about how you got into this role and what it is that you find so enjoyable. And most people are going to be open to that. So I was friendly, made friends, and then I stayed at that, resulted in organic friendship where I stayed in touch with them over the next couple of years. And there's a much longer version of that story, but the nutshell version is that I had unintentionally positioned myself to be a good fit for one of the leadership roles over that deployment. So I think it's just being self-aware of what you're interested in, the kinds of things you want to get involved in, and looking for opportunities to do that, even if, like, I couldn't have foreseen that a 2-month rotation in New York would lead to me leading a national deployment the way that I did, or being a part of a team that led that national deployment.
Yeah, I love that. I also think so many good nuggets that you just spoke about is like, sometimes career pivots and changes don't just happen overnight. A lot of the time it is a very long-term, has a long-term timeline to it. I'd love to know from the audience if they have experienced career shifts or career pivots at all, and like what that experience is like for them. We have Irene from France and Eamon from Saudi Arabia. So we have a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. So I'd love to hear like what their experiences are. But like you said, like the timeline is not, it doesn't happen overnight, and it evolves and it shifts. And you spoke so well about building relationships and utilizing your soft skills to help create the shift for you and create opportunities for you. Mm-hmm. And so I'd also love to know, like, whenever one person is considering a shift in a career or maybe a pivot, what type of community should you surround yourself with? You and I talked about sometimes you have people who have a very linear career trajectory, and so they might not see the shift or pivot. They might view it as a career limiting move rather than a move of growth. So how do you make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the right people to make those shifts and growth possible?
Right. That's a really good question. I like how you put that, because yes, when you enter a particular company or a firm, there's always going to be what I would call like a traditional path, like somebody who starts here and then they get to here. I'm trying to keep my hand on the screen. And there's a path to follow to get there. And so most people who you're going to be reporting to and talking with have probably followed that path. They started here and they ended up here. And most of their colleagues probably did the same thing. So that's what they know. And that's what they're going to speak from. That's where their advice is going to come from. And it's well-intentioned, but it might not be the best advice for you because things change and innovation happens and change happens. And so if you are the type of person that's staying open-minded and open to that, then it's important to have a community of people around you to give you varying advice. So I think it's important to have friends and colleagues within your own department, within your own firm, but outside of that department and outside of that firm because they're going to bring a different perspective. And it's important to know what their career stories are. Because if you're talking to somebody who's never made a career pivot, maybe they've stayed in their office their whole career, maybe they've stayed in one role their whole career, they're going to have a perspective on that that's going to be naturally limited. And they're not going to be able to speak to, from their own experience, what a major career shift looks like and things to evaluate. So if you're ever hearing advice on a big career shift where someone's telling you it's a career limiting move, consider the source of where that's coming from. Consider what shifts has that person had in their own career. Have they had any or not? It's because most of the advice that I was getting when I was evaluating, am I going to leave behind my clients, my colleagues, my personal life, friends, not-for-profits that I was involved in, organizations that I supported? I mean, my personal life just gone, and my professional life is going to change too. So I had to pack up. I had to pack up and move to Dallas, Texas, from Virginia. That's a big move. And so when I was evaluating that, most of the advice that I was getting was very positive because it was coming from people who were already involved in this and who had already been through a career shift and could see, they had a vision for where this was going. They could see the potential in it. But for somebody who's had a more limited career experience, that might come across as fearful because it is a big risk. It's a huge risk to take to have a big career shift, to pack up your life and move somewhere else and take on a role where that's very different from the role that you've already been in. Even if you're a natural fit for it, it's a risk to take. It's a bold move. It's a brave move. So it's important to have a diverse amount of opinions in that to make sure that you're making the right decision for yourself, especially since it's going to affect not just your professional life, but your personal life too, which is important. So when hearing career limiting move, it could be that that's good advice. It could be that that's good advice, but just I guess my point would be if it sounds tone deaf, if it sounds dissonant with where you are, and if it sounds unrealistic, then consider the source of where that's coming from.
Definitely. And I think supply chain specifically is a really unique industry in that a lot of people just kind of fall into it. And so a lot of times entering the supply chain industry within itself is a career change with entirely alone. And so one thing you talked about that I would love to expand more is like the role of like resistance and self-doubt, whether that's from your internal fear. Because I mean, like you said, it is a very scary thing, whether you're 21 years old like myself or you're in the middle of your career. Those changes are scary. Yes, Jason understands. That's how he got into supply chain because it was a career pivot. You just kind of fall into it. Mm-hmm. And so with that fear and with that kind of the scariness of it, I think the advantage of being young is that I'm not necessarily attached to a house, or I don't have as many attachments. Well, like someone who's in the middle of the career, they might have a family, they may have all these things they have to consider. So how do you conquer that resistance and that self-doubt, whether it's coming from yourself or whether it's coming from a colleague or a different source?
It's a really good question. And I think my example is unique in that I was prepared and had a few tools that I could use to overcome the self-doubt. Because on one hand, somebody could say, you don't have a background in software deployment or software support. How are you a good fit to stand with this team of professionals that's overseeing this deployment to a large firm, which represented not just a new software that we were using that was replacing something that was old. This was a complete shift in how the audit practice did almost everything. So it was a big change. But when any time within a company that's doing something that's that big, that's that monumental, it's not going to be cold turkey. There's going to be like a pilot program, and I made sure that I got into the pilot program. Like I lobbied to get an audit into that pilot program because I thought that would be a good opportunity for me professionally. I had a team of people working for me that were important to me, and I thought professionally it would be a good opportunity for them. I thought it would be a good opportunity for my home office to be one of only 20 teams globally in that pilot. So it was kind of baby steps to where I got used to this software in the pilot, which naturally positioned me to help lead the extended pilot where we had, I think, 5 or 10 audits within my home office. So we went from 1 to 5 or 10. So that was a step where I was already used to it. I knew the pitfalls, I knew the benefits. And what I learned in this role in helping lead this for my local office was I was really good at helping people to see the potential of it. Look how much better your life is going to be. Look how much easier all of this is going to be. Look at all this drama that you're already tolerating and putting up with that's going to be gone, that you're not going to have to tolerate anymore. So any pressure points or pain points as we're navigating this change are not incremental. They're replacing pressure and pain points that you're already tolerating, that you're just used to and not even aware of anymore. So then came the opportunity to lead this nationally with a team of other professionals. And I think I had stood out at being able to convince others of the potential of where this was going and to help them see the positives. And I think what helped me get over my self-doubt was the fact that there were some steps in this process and that I was embracing those steps and just letting it play out the way that it was going to play out. And to making the most of the opportunities that came my way. So when they wanted me to help lead this for my home office, yes, even though that was going to mean a lot more work for me, it was going to mean longer hours, a little bit more stress, because I wasn't just going to have my own, I was going to have others that I was helping too, but I really wanted to do it. And I just found myself gravitating towards it. It just seemed to take the software element that I had a natural knack for and I was passionate about and combined it with accounting. So it made me a natural fit for that. So that when I got to the national level, I already had experience doing what I was going to be doing, just on a much smaller scale. And so I also was self-confident enough to know that I felt like I was the right fit at the right time for that role. As difficult as that decision was to make, and it was a long process for that decision, I think that decision stretched out over 4 or 5 weeks. So that's something that's important to think about, because when these opportunities come your way, they're usually not looking for you to make that decision like right now. Usually there's going to be several conversations that are going to take place over a couple of weeks. Like for me, the first conversation was just the person initially pitching it. They didn't have all the details. They just opened the door to the conversation. So I found that conversation kind of jarring, and I wasn't sure. I had no plans to leave Richmond, so that I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but I stayed calm and I stayed open to what the conversations were going to be. So the next conversation was a woman who was already on the team, who had a lot more information. So that shed a lot more light on the decision. The next conversation was with a partner who was going to be leading this deployment. And so that helped me understand even more about it. So as the weeks went by and as the conversations went by and as I was learning more about it, I was becoming a lot more confident that this was the right decision for me to make. And also things can change during these conversations. Initially, they wanted me to go to New York or New Jersey. And about midway through the conversation, all of a sudden Dallas was an option because they decided to split the team. Now, Dallas is a very different conversation than New York and New Jersey. So I was thankful that I'm from Arkansas. I grew up going to Dallas. I was familiar with the city. I had sorority sisters in the area. So that's a different conversation than New York and New Jersey. So that added another personal element to the decision that I couldn't have seen coming. And I was thankful that I'd stayed open to allowing the conversations to continue and didn't shut this down prematurely.
Yeah, definitely. I think being open-minded is so important. And I feel like sometimes it's the people who are like in the middle of their careers can sometimes be a little bit more open-minded than people my age, because to an extent, I feel like a lot of college students, like they enter it and they're like, well, my major was this. And they just feel like boxed into like this career vision or this like career idea.
It's because you don't know yet.
Yes.
That's why. It's not anything limiting about you. It's just that you don't know everything that you don't know yet. And you learn that as you go into your career and things start unfolding, you start to realize, oh, there's a lot more opportunity out here than I could have possibly have appreciated when I was graduating from college. So I think that's natural.
Exactly. I feel like I get the question as someone who's very passionate about supply chain. And honestly, for the people who are in who are involved in supply chain or just any industry, feel free to like comment in the chat, like how you got into supply chain, what pivot change, if it was, that got you into supply chain. Because I think that could be really encouraging for people my age to read that and see, oh, this happened to this person and maybe that could happen to me. But I know now it's like I get a lot of questions being like, oh, what do you want to do within supply chain? And it's like so many thoughts go in my head and I'm like, how am I to choose there? And there's so many options. And we're actually going to watch a TikTok later that kind of talks a little bit more about that. And so I think staying open-minded is simply crucial. Even like being, and I think starting to be open-minded right as a student and then continuing to like want to learn and continue to be open-minded in your profession, like that's where fruitful opportunities will stem from, and identifying your strengths and your weaknesses. I know that's something you and I talk about a lot, especially as women, is identifying our strengths and knowing when it is the right moment to pursue those opportunities and to be successful. Do you feel like like men and women could potentially like approach these shifts differently? And like, how was that for you?
It's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that. If men and women would approach these differently, I don't know, because my experience is going to be anecdotal, just based on, the individual men and women that I worked with in my career. I think on the surface, I'm tempted to say no, but in thinking about the people that I've worked with over my career, within public accounting and within corporations, the women have had different paths, more so, I think, than the men. That's purely anecdotal, and obviously that's my impression of that. But I think for varying reasons, and I look at my closest friends that are within my network and within my friend group, they're all women, and we've all had major career shifts. So for me, it was within the same firm, but I went from this audit role that was traditional for accounting into a software deployment role, which is completely different. And then the other women that I've worked with that I'm really close with have done similar things. They've made major shifts in their careers, and we're open-minded and we're open to it. There are men that have done it too, but my impression is that at least the women that I worked with heavily seem to have had very different shifts in their careers than I think any of us would have anticipated.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to highlight this comment because I think that is just so true. Like just understanding when to say yes and no to certain opportunities that allow you to work towards that shift. Because like we said, I think that's a huge takeaway that I hope the audience does take away, is that shifts are not overnight. And so pursuing those opportunities and putting the work in so you can see whether you see a shift or whether it kind of falls into your lap, putting the work in and saying yes to those opportunities. So I just thought this was a really great comment. So I'm glad they got to share that. But Alison, I now have some TikToks for us to watch for so fun. So for the audience, with Let's Talk Supply Chain, I work a lot with our TikTok and creating content that is supply chain based, especially towards the next generation of supply chain. And so I always think it's fun to end it on just some fun videos. I have two for us today. One of them is of myself, and then the other one is of a delightful young gal. So cool. And so here is the first one. It's by Lindsay Albanese. Thank you for letting us use your video.
Every time you gotta go to work, man, I know this feeling. Take it as a sign. You feel like there's a calling telling you to do something else, to follow a passion. Oh, I have felt this. If you feel something in your gut that is telling you to pursue or try something else, take that risk. There is no worse risk than not taking the risk. Say that again. There's no room for growth. You want to grow, but there's just no room for you. Now, there's some people, they don't want to grow in their position. They like to be in the same spot, and that's cool. But if you want to grow and there's no growth, you got to move on. 3 signs it's time to move on from a job. You feel.
So that was the first one.
She's right.
I thought that was a really fun TikTok because yes, as Rhonda just said, it is very intuitive and know your intuition of when you need to change. And I think she does a great job of I also highlighted her on a terrible spot. So sorry. But knowing like your intuition. And those are like really, I think she highlighted some really awesome drivers of why you would need to change jobs or a career in general.
Yep.
I was like, I didn't know. I was like, do you have any more thoughts you'd like to add?
I think I loved her second point. She made a really good point in the first one where you're just feeling anxiety and depressed and sad. Now, not every role is going to be joyful, but I think it's important to distinguish the difference between running away from something versus running towards something that you really love and that you really want to do. So if you're running towards something, that should be telling you that probably there's something there that you should be paying attention to and that you probably should pursue if you're feeling pulled or called or drawn in that direction versus fleeing.
Awesome. And then I'll share the second one. I'm not sure if we'll be able to see it, but
in my backyard, boy, it's super fine in your corduroy. Drive me by the 5, 6, 7,
I'm not entirely sure if we're able to see this, but okay, there we go. I'll do it one more time.
Backyard, boy, look, it's super fine in your corduroy. Drive me by the.
So I wanted to include that TikTok because one, I thought I looked really good in it, but mostly because I think it highlights so many, like that is just like a supply chain specific TikTok within itself. And there's so many career options and just job options within that alone. So I would hope that people would watch that and feel like really encouraged by it and being like, oh, wow, I'm not fit into this. I don't have to fit into this one box. I don't have to decide what I have to do now. If someone who does enter their career at my age and loves what they're doing, but 20 years later, they want to shift, I hope that they can like find encouragement with the fact that there are so many different options for us in within all of our careers, no matter how young or old you are.
Right.
I was like, do you have any? I was like, what are your thoughts? Any ideas about?
I thought you demonstrated that really well. You had the supply chain major on one side and then all this long list of opportunities on the other side. And when you're in college right now, it's hard to appreciate how much opportunity is going to come your way. And that should be very encouraging. I mean, it should be good news. It means you shouldn't be putting too much pressure on yourself too early, that these opportunities are going to come your way. Often we have to be patient in a job or in a role that's a little bit more difficult or challenging. But frankly, those are the roles that we learn the most from. I was talking about this with a good friend of mine a couple nights ago. We were reflecting on some of the hardest things we've ever been through, the most difficult, the ones that really stretched us and pulled us. But those are the ones that we reflect on more because we learned the most from those. So like, for example, being involved in a pilot of a new software is difficult. We on purpose made that difficult for ourselves. We could have just gone through a traditional audit, but no, we added a pilot program of a new software on top of it. And that was stressful. But my whole team learned a lot from that, and it positioned my whole team to have roles in that deployment later on.
Yeah, I love that. And that all goes to being open-minded, surrounding yourself with the right community. And really is a great way to end our show. But I'd like to say for our TikTok, thank you, Kadar, for saying that it's a brilliant idea. It's very fun to run the TikTok. If you guys are interested in having your TikToks be seen on our live show, please post a TikTok. It can honestly be about anything supply chain, next generation, or just whatever you're passionate about, and tag Let's Talk Supply Chain. We would love to feature you on our show. Thank you, Let's Talk Supply Chain and Ships, for sponsoring Coming in Hot by Abby Baird. And thank you. Look at what a kind comment. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone can leave feeling really encouraged by the fact that it's never too late or honestly too early to have a career pivot. We're all constantly learning and growing as professionals and as individuals. And lastly, thank you, Alison, so much for coming. You shared so much insight that I know I'm really thankful for, and I'm sure our audience is really going to take away a lot and be really thankful for it. So thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. Make sure you catch us next month for Coming in Hot. And it was great talking to you, Alison.
So good to see you, Abby. I look forward to meeting you in person when this pandemic is finally going to be over.
That's what I'm most looking forward to, seeing all these people that I've just seen in like a square in person. It's going to be so good. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. And it was so great talking to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.